Across Cambodia's low-lying delta, the Funan Techo Canal is being drawn like a new cut toward the sea. This is not merely a $1.7 billion canal project, but Cambodia's attempt to reshape its position on Southeast Asia's trade map. For years, much of the country's export cargo has had to move through the Mekong River system and Vietnam's seaports. That meant Cambodia's strategic transport route remained dependent on infrastructure beyond its own borders. So Phnom Penh decided to carve out a waterway corridor of its own. But how much can a new canal truly shift the region's logistics balance and geopolitical landscape? Let's explore it with Mandarin Tech. The Funan Techo Canal is located in southern Cambodia. It is designed to stretch 180 kilometers in length, with a width of 100 meters and a depth of 5.4 meters, allowing vessels of up to 3,000 tons to travel directly from the inland regions to the sea without passing through the Mekong-Basak river system into Vietnamese territory. The project broke ground in 2024 and is expected to be completed by 2028. Beyond the main canal route, the project also includes a system of ship locks, water-regulating gates, overpasses, canal-side roads, and logistics centers along the transport corridor. Its goal is not only to boost trade, reduce shipping costs, and support economic growth in Cambodia's inland regions, but also to carry deep strategic significance by giving the country greater control over its access to the sea and reducing reliance on transport routes that pass through a neighboring country. This canal is therefore more than a large-scale infrastructure project. It is a development that could influence both the ecological balance and regional relations in the years ahead. Turning this vision into reality requires a carefully planned construction strategy. The work begins with detailed cadastral mapping. Surveys and geotechnical investigations are carried out to map the soil layers along the route. Each section is clearly marked. For a project stretching across multiple provinces, staking out the route is not merely a technical procedure. It is the first step in reorganizing the entire construction space on the ground. Bulldozers and construction vehicles then begin moving onto the site, gradually clearing and leveling the first layer of land. Shrub-covered areas are removed, weak ground is reinforced, and obstacles are cleared away to create an uninterrupted construction zone. At the same time, temporary access roads are formed throughout the project area, linking material storage points with excavation and embankment zones. Thanks to these roads, dump trucks, excavators, fuel carriers, and other vehicles can move continuously across the site. The most difficult part comes when the canal route passes through areas where people live and farm, where every meter of land is tied to local livelihoods. Land acquisition, compensation, and the reorganization of land use must be carried out alongside construction preparation. Because if even one section has not been fully handed over, the entire construction chain can be disrupted, slowing the overall progress of the project. Once the site has been prepared, the Funan Techo construction site enters the canal excavation phase. The work is not carried out by digging straight down to the final depth in a single operation. Engineers have to divide the canal bed into sections, layers, and different slope levels. First, the top soil mixed with roots, organic mud, and weak materials is removed. Then, excavators begin lowering the ground level layer by layer, gradually forming the basic shape of the canal's cross-section. In dry and stable ground sections, progress can move faster. Excavators dig along the route, dump trucks run continuously in convoys, and bulldozers behind them adjust the side slopes and level the construction area. But in low-lying zones where groundwater and soft mud are densely present, everything becomes far more complicated. If the excavation goes too deep in one attempt, the canal slopes may collapse. If water is not drained in time, the excavation pit can turn into a swamp, causing heavy machinery to sink and slowing down the entire construction chain. To deal with this, construction teams must dig temporary drainage channels, build small embankments, and use pumps to keep the working area dry enough. In locations prone to landslides, the canal slopes are shaped to a safe gradient, then reinforced with rock and compacted soil. Alongside the excavation work, engineers continuously check the elevation of the canal bottom, the angle of the side slopes, and the drainage capacity of each section. Every meter excavated incorrectly can change the volume of material, affect the operating depth, or create weak points along the canal banks in the future. For this reason, the construction site is not only a race of machines, but also a precise process of control between soil, water, and design. Each bucket of earth lifted from the delta is also one part of a new transport corridor gradually being opened. As the separate excavation sections are connected, Funan Techo is no longer just an idea on paper. It begins to take the shape of a waterway that could carry Cambodian cargo directly toward the sea. In the initial phase, the project focuses on site clearance, the construction of temporary access roads, and the excavation of the canal bed along the main sections of the route. As these foundational tasks are gradually completed, the project will move into the next stages, where the technical complexity becomes much higher. After that, supporting infrastructure will be deployed simultaneously. Dozens of overpasses must be built to maintain road connections between the two sides of the canal. At the same time, ship locks, water-regulating gates, flood control embankments, and flow control points will be installed to ensure that the canal can operate safely without causing major disruption to the surrounding area. Once the main structures are completed, the project will shift into the final development of the transport corridor. According to the plan, the heaviest construction phase will take place from 2024 to 2026, when excavation, embankment work, ground treatment, and the construction of basic hydraulic structures are accelerated. From 2026 to 2027, the focus will move toward completing bridges, ship locks, water-regulating gates, and logistics facilities. The year 2028 is expected to be reserved for technical inspections, system testing, and the official operation of the entire route. However, the actual progress may still change depending on weather conditions, geological challenges, and the ability to mobilize capital. Another factor drawing attention is the issue of financing. With a total investment of around 1.7 billion US dollars, equivalent to nearly 4% of Cambodia's GDP, the project represents a very large infrastructure investment for the country's economy. The government has stated that the financing will be mobilized through a partnership between the state and the private sector, with Cambodian companies retaining control of the project. However, observers are still closely watching the project's ability to secure funding and maintain disbursement progress in the coming years. If every component proceeds according to plan, the Funan Techo Canal will not only be completed in 2028, but will also open a fully developed artificial waterway connecting Phnom Penh with the Gulf of Thailand and laying the foundation for Cambodia's next stage of economic development. To understand why Cambodia is willing to invest billions of dollars in a canal project, it is necessary to look at the country's geography. Although Cambodia has more than 440 kilometers of coastline, much of its economic activity and population is concentrated deep inland, around the capital Phnom Penh and the Mekong River basin. To transport goods to the sea, vessels usually have to travel down the Mekong and Basak rivers before passing through Vietnamese territory to reach the South China Sea. This means that a large share of Cambodia's import and export activity depends on an international waterway that runs through a neighboring country. Whenever congestion, changes in maritime regulations, or political factors occur, Cambodia's logistics costs can all be affected. The Funan Techo Canal is expected to connect the Basak River with the coastal area of the Gulf of Thailand, allowing cargo vessels to travel directly to seaports without crossing the border. For Phnom Penh, this is not simply a shorter route. It also means that Cambodia can gain greater control over its own supply chain. Beyond transportation, the canal is also expected to drive economic development in the southern provinces. As waterway transport becomes more convenient, industrial zones, warehouses, and logistics centers will have the conditions to emerge along the transport corridor. Land value, commercial activity, and investment are also expected to rise accordingly. If it operates as expected, the Funan Techo Canal could bring significant changes to Cambodia's economy. Waterway transport has always been far less costly than road transport. When goods can move directly from production areas to seaports, businesses can reduce shipping time, fuel consumption, and many intermediate costs. In an increasingly competitive global environment, even a reduction of just a few percent in logistics costs can create a meaningful advantage. Beyond transportation, the canal also opens opportunities for the development of new industrial zones. Many countries around the world have shown that major transport corridors often lead to the emergence of manufacturing hubs, warehouses, and logistics services. If Cambodia can make good use of this opportunity, Funan Techo could become a new driver of growth for the country's southern region. The construction and real estate sectors will also benefit during the early phase. Tens of thousands of workers are being mobilized to the construction site, while demand for materials, cement, steel, and transport services rises significantly. Looking further ahead, the canal could also promote waterway tourism. Tourist boat routes connecting Phnom Penh with the coastal region could entirely emerge if the supporting infrastructure is developed in a coordinated way. However, these benefits can only be achieved if cargo volume is large enough to operate the canal efficiently. Some experts argue that Cambodia's current import and export output remains modest compared with the scale of the investment. Therefore, the project's final economic effectiveness will depend on how quickly the country's trade develops in the years ahead. Any large-scale water infrastructure project comes with environmental questions, and the Funan Techo Canal is no exception. The canal passes through a low-lying delta region where rivers, wetlands, and rice fields are closely connected. Creating a new waterway could alter the direction of water flows in many areas. One of the biggest concerns is the amount of water drawn from the Mekong and Basak river systems. Scientists argue that if water regulation is not managed properly, water flow in some areas could change seasonally, affecting agricultural production and natural ecosystems. In addition, excavating hundreds of millions of cubic meters of earth will create a massive volume of dredged material that must be handled carefully. If the excavated material is not well managed, erosion, sediment buildup, and water pollution could occur during construction. Wetland areas along the route are also habitats for many aquatic species and water birds. Changes to these habitats could reduce biodiversity if appropriate conservation measures are not put in place. Climate change is another factor that must be considered. Cambodia's delta is already affected by heavy rainfall, drought, and rising sea levels. Therefore, the system of water regulating gates and water level controls must be flexible enough to adapt to future changes. The Cambodian government says the project has undergone an environmental impact assessment and that various measures will be applied to limit damage to ecosystems. However, researchers argue that continued monitoring is needed throughout both the construction and operation phases to accurately assess the project's real-world impacts. Beyond its economic benefits, the Funan Techo Canal is also seen as a project with deep geopolitical significance. If Cambodia can open its own waterway from the inland region to the Gulf of Thailand, the regional transport balance could change. In the past, much of Cambodia's cargo had to pass through the Mekong River system in Vietnam's seaports. But with this new canal, Phnom Penh hopes to reduce that dependence while gaining greater control over trade, logistics, and transport security. For this reason, the project is being watched not only from a construction perspective, but also from the perspective of regional relations. Vietnam and many international organizations are especially concerned about the canal's possible effects on water flow, water resources, and the downstream Mekong ecosystem. In a river basin where tens of millions of people depend on rivers for farming, fishing, and daily life, any major change must be assessed carefully. The future of the Funan Techo Canal therefore depends on many factors at once. If operated effectively, the canal could become a new driver of growth for Cambodia, opening its own trade corridor and helping the southern provinces develop more strongly. But if environmental management, water regulation, and financing are not handled carefully, the project could also create long-term risks. The Funan Techo Canal is therefore not just a canal, it is a test of Cambodia's infrastructure ambition and of its ability to balance economic development, environmental protection, and regional stability in the Mekong area. From an idea on a drawing board, the Funan Techo Canal is gradually becoming one of the most closely watched infrastructure projects in Southeast Asia. Every meter of canal being excavated is not only opening a new transport route for Cambodia, but also reflecting how a country seeks greater control over its trade and connection with the world. Will this become a route that opens a new stage of development for Cambodia, or will it turn into another link in Southeast Asia's increasingly complex geopolitical competition? Share your thoughts in the comments below. And don't forget to like and subscribe to Mandarin Tech to join us in exploring the mega projects that are shaping the world.